All right, so here's the story. NPR was first to break this story today. Reporter Jenna McLaughlin publishing a more than 7,000-word piece, citing more than 30 sources. But the core of the story is based on a whistleblower disclosure from an IT staffer at the National Labor Relations Board named Daniel Berulis. And last month, Mr. Berulis says that DOGE staffers arrived at the headquarters of the National Labor Relations Board. He can't be positive they were from DOGE, but whoever they were, he says they accessed National Labor Relations Board data systems for about a week, and then they deleted the accounts they had created in order to work in those systems. So they got in for about a week, and then they deleted the accounts they had created to work inside those systems. Now, what's in those systems? Well, National Labor Relations Board has a lot of internal data that's really sensitive. The point of that agency is they adjudicate labor complaints at various companies. So their internal systems include a lot of really sensitive proprietary data about US companies and about their employees and about unions and about whistleblowers. It includes really sensitive stuff like witness testimony and legal information about ongoing cases. According to Mr. Berulis' disclosure, he believes DOGE staffers took steps to make sure that whatever they did while they were inside the systems at the agency was not logged. So in the internal data systems of the agency, there were no traceable records of what they did inside the system because they configured their access to the system in ways that they could either manually or automatically remove traces of what they had done. But while they were in there, Mr. Berulis says, there was a large exfiltration of data. A large exfiltration of data, almost all text files. And when I say it was a large exfiltration, to give you a sense of how unusual this was for the agency, this screenshot from Mr. Berulis' disclosure shows that large spike in outbound traffic leaving the agency and how unusual it was compared to normal activity on their systems. He says the logs that should have shown what that was just attributed that large exfiltration of data to a deleted account. And he says the location where the data went had been obscured. There was no listing as to where the data went. Mr. Berulis then found that while these people were inside the system, this is worrying, they had disabled the core security systems that keep the agency's systems and data secure and private. Quoting from NPR, someone had disabled controls that would prevent insecure or unauthorized mobile devices from logging onto the system without the proper security settings. There was an interface exposed to the public internet, potentially allowing malicious actors access to the NLRB systems. Internal alerting and monitoring systems were found to be manually turned off, and multi-factor authentication was disabled. Now, why would these guys disable all the security on the system at this agency and then leave it that way when they got out? I don't know, and neither do you. But this is also from Mr. Berulis' whistleblower disclosure. Quote, I noticed increased logins blocked by our access policy due to those logins being out of the country. For example, in the days after DOGE accessed NLRB's systems, we noticed a user with an IP address in Russia started trying to log in. Those attempts were blocked, but they were especially alarming. Whoever was attempting to log in was using one of the newly created accounts that were used in the other DOGE-related activities. It appeared they had the correct username and password. Now, these attempted logins from Russia were only stopped, quote, due to our no out-of-country logins policy. But there were more than 20 such attempts. And what is particularly concerning is that many of these login attempts occurred within 15 minutes of those accounts being created by DOGE engineers. So, I mean, the allegations here, to sum them up, kind of go like this. Now, NBC News has not independently verified these allegations. This is simply what has been described in a whistleblower's disclosure from Mr. Berulis. But what he is saying is this. According to what he can tell, they get in, they structure their access once they're in there so nobody can see what they're doing while they're in there. While they are in there, lots of data from this very sensitive agency gets taken to parts unknown. Then they leave all the doors unlocked and all the alarms off, and then immediately someone with an IP address in Russia starts logging into the system using one of the DOGE accounts with what appears to be a working username and password. And then there's one last piece of this. Mr. Berulis says that within the agency, they saw enough to convene a formal review of what they perceived to be a serious breach, a theft of the agency's sensitive data. They started their formal review. They prepared a request to CISA, the cybersecurity agency at Homeland Security, to help them investigate. As that process of requesting help from CISA was underway, Mr. Berulis got a personal threat. Quote, in the days after Berulis and his colleagues prepared a request for CISA's help investigating the breach, Berulis found a printed letter in an envelope taped to his door, which included threatening language, sensitive personal information, and overhead pictures of him walking his dog. It is unclear who sent it, but the letter made specific reference to his decision to report the breach. Law enforcement is investigating the letter. In a letter to the House and Senate committees who had oversight over NLRB, the agency here, Mr. Berulis' lawyer, who's from the nonprofit group Whistleblower Aid, he tells the chairs and the ranking members of those committees, quote, the threatening note made clear reference to this very disclosure Mr. Berulis was preparing for you as the proper oversight authority. While we do not know specifically who did this, we can only speculate that it involves someone with the ability to access NLRB systems. This meat space action, meaning real life, this meat space action where a threat was physically delivered to my client's home is absolutely disturbing in its manner and the implications suggested therein. Accordingly, we have been and will continue to be coordinating with appropriate law enforcement agencies. Given the aforementioned, we request that both law enforcement agencies and Congress initiate an immediate investigation into the cybersecurity breach and data exfiltration at NLRB and any other agencies where DOGE has accessed internal systems. Now, we tried to get comment tonight from the White House and from NLRB, in addition to requests by NBC News for comment from NLRB and Elon Musk. There was a statement to NPR from an NLRB spokesperson in which the spokesperson denied that NLRB granted DOGE access to its systems. They said DOGE had not requested access to the agency's systems. They said an internal investigation conducted after Mr. Berulis raised his concerns, quote, determined that no breach of agency systems occurred. The whistleblower himself and his attorney are going to join us here live next. Stay with us.
With Alex.
It's from a letter to Congress released today by the nonprofit group Whistleblower Aid about a whistleblower who's just come forward named Daniel Berulis. Quote, Mr. Berulis is coming forward today because of his concern that recent activity by members of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, have resulted in a significant cybersecurity breach that likely has and continues to expose our government to foreign intelligence and our nation's adversaries. This declaration details DOGE activity within the National Labor Relations Board, the exfiltration of data from NLRB systems, and concerningly, near real-time access by users in Russia. Notably, within minutes of DOGE personnel creating user accounts in NLRB systems, on multiple occasions, someone or something within Russia attempted to log in using all of the valid credentials, usernames and passwords. This, combined with verifiable data being systematically exfiltrated to unknown servers within the United States and perhaps abroad, merits investigation. Joining us now is NLRB whistleblower Daniel Berulis and his attorney, Andrew Bakaj. Mr. Berulis, Mr. Bakaj, I really appreciate you being here. I'm sure this is a stressful time for both of you and a stressful experience being on national TV talking about it. I really appreciate your trust to do this.
Thank you for having us on.
So, Mr. Berulis, let me ask you about some of the pushback that we've had here. NLRB said in a statement that DOGE didn't access National Labor Relations Board data. They said that DOGE never had access specifically even to the building in which National Labor Relations Board is housed. What's your response to that statement from the agency? We're having a hard time sort of making heads or tails of it.
I totally get that. I think it's an initial knee-jerk reaction. The truth is it was almost immediate after they got notice of this. there's not going to be corroborating evidence like I presented that they're going to be able to present to back up these. What I did is I tried to prove the negatives along the way, and I compartmentalized the investigation. So as part of this, I definitely was careful to not, say anything that wasn't true or include anything that I couldn't back up with secondary sources. And so I think if we can get the right people in here for transparency, I would absolutely love it if I was wrong about this. It's just, we need other people we need real forensic analysis, and that's what we were trying to do with this cert.
And that goes back to what we requested, which is an independent investigation, because again, Dan provided not only what he saw, but the forensic details to back up his concerns. And so part and parcel of an investigation is to, of course, speak to others, and there will be other individuals who will be able to corroborate what Dan saw, because they saw it themselves.
In terms of what you witnessed, you presented this screenshot showing what appears to be a large surge in data leaving the agency. For people who aren't familiar with what the NLRB does and what kind of data that might be, what is the sensitivity of the kinds of data that's housed in NLRB systems? What worries you about that potentially being exfiltrated to parts unknown?
Sure, absolutely. So what we're looking at there in the picture is the outgoing data out of from our internal network. There's also a correlating spike in the outgoing data from the database that houses our internal case data. So things like proprietary company secrets, union organizer names, private affidavits of unfair labor practice complainants. These are things that traditionally would be kept in a judicial system behind lock and key, and not anything to do with efficiency for sure.
Why would the security systems that protect the secrecy and the sort of sanctity of that data ever be disabled? Is there a sort of good faith reason that somebody would allow insecure mobile devices to access that data, or remove multi-factor authentication for people who are trying to access those data? Those security systems being disabled within NLRB's systems, to me, just seem completely inexplicable. At least they don't seem like the sort of thing that could be done in a good faith sort of way. But am I missing something? Is that something that IT professionals do for other reasons?
No, you're absolutely correct. They're considered indicators of compromise. And the people that I work with are very meticulous. They're borderline OCD, and these aren't mistakes that I've ever seen them make before. So for all these controls to be off, in this small amount of time, it doesn't speak to it being accidental.
Once you and your colleagues decided, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Bakaj.
No, and one of the things I also want to point out to you, because you did an outstanding job, Rachel, in going over exactly how foreign intelligence likely was able to try and access NLRB databases. This is more than just the NLRB. Dan is here because he's been brave enough to come forward with what he saw, what he witnessed, what he can actually establish through forensic data. We have heard from others there are many people like Dan, but who are afraid to come forward. And we've also heard that in addition to how the systems were being treated by DOGE within NLRB, what we've also seen is that these systems were also connected to Starlink. Now, why is Starlink critical? Starlink is critical because the information that flows through Starlink goes directly to Russia. What has happened was back in last year, the Department of Defense has stopped using Starlink in any way, shape, or form, because that is viewed as a direct pipeline there. And this is something that is also being seen in other agencies, not just NLRB. The other thing that's really concerning is that, and I don't want to say that this was done intentionally, it could be done unintentionally by accident by those who are working within DOGE, which is they have allowed certain specific critical infrastructure in other agencies, such as within the Department of Energy, where you have nuclear regulatory agencies overseeing our nuclear stockpile, etc., where that has been now opened to the open internet. So critical infrastructure throughout the country has unfortunately been provided access to the open internet, which means our foreign adversaries, like Russia, can and may have access to all of that. So the way that I would frame this is that what Dan is seeing and what others like Dan are seeing within our government is that this is like Chernobyl and them seeing the control systems light up post-meltdown. This is where we are.
Yeah.
Let me be clear on the issue of foreign access to NLRB systems. What you saw, Dan, is a Russian IP address. So you can spoof an IP address. It could be somebody pretending to be in Russia and not actually being there, attempting to log into these systems in very close proximity to the time that DOGE was creating. DOGE, as you say, was creating accounts in order to access these systems. But there's no proof of who that was, or if in fact that was, a foreign intelligence service or even a foreign actor, right? It was just a Russian IP address, right?
So there are some caveats, but to the effect, yes, it was the same geolocation multiple times, and it's just one of the small factors that adds up to the bigger picture. You have one of these, you consider it maybe a fluke, but you have 40 or 50 of these indicators, and the bigger picture becomes clear.
Let me ask you about the threat that you received, Dan. You and your colleagues at NLRB had decided to pursue a formal investigation into what you regarded as a breach of the data and systems at your agency. You prepared a request to CISA at the Department of Homeland Security to help you with that investigation. And then you received a threat at your home where you live?
Where I hadn't lived for too long either. I've only been there 2 months. The only place that I've actually updated that address is in the OPM database for my payroll with the government. That's really, I haven't even updated my bank card yet. So
can you tell us about the character of the threat?
I think it was vague enough to not be. Can I just?
Yeah, I can jump in there for Dan, because this is actually quite difficult for him to talk about because it is quite personal. So this is a letter who somebody had drafted. And within the letter, there was specific information about Dan that can only be obtained through, for example, internal databases within the government. Because it's not anything, and we've had individuals conduct an investigation. We've had our own investigative team conduct an investigation to see whether or not any of this is really easily accessible online, and it's not. And so there's information that very few individuals would know. It could be something that was submitted to the government on an SF-86, a security clearance background investigation, etc. And the fact that he's only been at this residence for 2 months or less. We have that. We have the fact that somebody literally figured out where he lives, taped this note to his door, and flew a drone above him while he was walking his dog. I mean, I've only seen this once or twice in the years where I've represented whistleblowers or conducted investigations like this. When I saw this made me pause and get concerned about Dan and what's going on. And this is pure and simple witness and whistleblower intimidation, because this came forward before we even filed anything with the government, which means that somebody was monitoring his use of systems within the government, which for me is, it is an indicator as to where this is coming from. And the funny thing is that this was clearly done to intimidate him, to stop him from coming forward, but it didn't. And the reason why Dan came forward is not just to ensure that the truth comes out, but that other folks like him have the courage to come forward, because a lot of people believe or think that something is amiss, that this is happening within our agencies and within our government. But guess what? It is. And we have the evidence to establish that. And we need other people to come forward, because you know what? And one of my colleagues has said this once in the past, and it's so true. Courage is contagious. And this is in part why Dan is here and speaking with you today, not behind a silhouette or a screen, but directly to you today and to everybody, so that way we can hear what's actually happening.
Yeah, I agree. It's really to the point of where I feel like there's a culture of fear in the government right now that we're trying to combat. And by coming forward and standing up, even with this happening, I feel like fear and apathy are the death of democracy. And we can kind of, fight that if somebody's able to just show that they can do this and it's okay. I have plenty of other friends at other agencies that are terrified right now to come forward with what they have. And my hope is that they see this and they're able to do that now.
One of the things that Dan has told me is that he hopes that he's wrong.
Absolutely.
This is not something that we want to be the case, but we've been able to stress test this not just through Dan's own research and investigation, but through subject matter experts with whom we've worked in preparing this disclosure. And so what we're asking for is an investigation, somebody to look at this and take this seriously. Because you know what? there's personal identifiable information affecting American citizens that's flying out from the United States government, likely to Russia. But if that's not enough, then it's our national security. I mean, at some point, we all have to collectively wake up and say no and rebuild. Because unfortunately, I'm concerned that we're in a place where we can't undo what has been done, but we can know what happened, who did something wrong, hold people accountable, even if it's, at some point in time in the future, and rebuild, because that's where we need to be.
And again, the request here is for an independent investigation by law enforcement and Congress. National Labor Relations Board whistleblower Daniel Berulis and attorney Andrew Bakaj. Mr. Berulis, as I said at the outset, I know this is a very stressful time, and this is a stressful thing, including being on television with me right now. I thank you for your trust in doing it. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you both for helping us understand.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your coverage.
All right.
Yes.
All right. More news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.